coupling regime. Weak coupling regime also accounts for tunneling and interference between different reaction paths. And all this information fed basically to their sort of model, which calculates reaction constant, rate constants. And again, as I mentioned, we can do either microcanonical energy dependent constant or canonical, which depends on the temperature. So this is a little bit more detailed view of the code. I mentioned we use models, Fortran models, and this sort of different colors here indicate different models or different sets of models in case of raw vibrational density of states. We do use Python for configuration scripts. I think this is the only place we use Python. The rest is actually written in Fortran for now. I mean, we're not against Python, so, and I think it should be used for processing information. So, but pure math, I think Fortran is just perfectly fine still for this type of things. And especially if you use sort of this modular environment, it makes code very readable and very easy to modify, program, and teach new students, for example, to use this type of programming structures. So as I mentioned, we have a test sort of sets, which we also have external tests. We have test scripts, which basically run all this tests. We have tools, which for effective Hessian calculation, external MECP search. But the main sets of models, again, this is raw vibrational density of states, calculates basically vibrational rotational density of states with using different models. We have the calculation of basically probability of transition with different models again. So Landau-Zener, weak coupling, Nakamura, and some other basically methods for thermally dependent for canonical sort of probability of transitions. We eventually, this is all fed into the rate constant code, which basically calculate the canonical, microcanonical rate constant, forward, reverse reactions, and so on. And I also mentioned external MECP search model, which is basically can be used to if your electronic structure code doesn't have its own MECP search algorithm. So I want to quickly talk about few applications we've done with this sort of with this code. So one is we look at the sort of spin forbidden transition in metal-sulfur protein. So this is example of nickel iron hydrogenase, which is a protein which can oxidize or reduce hydrogen, and it does it especially very efficiently. And there is a lot of interest of sort of pulling the active sites which contain nickel and iron center from this hydrogenase and basically make it work in some type of industrial settings, because it's much cheaper catalyst when typically commonly use platinum catalysts, for example, for this type of reactions. So it turns out when you pull those from the proteins, or if you synthesize from scratch biomimetic models, those don't work very well. And it wasn't clear why they don't work. So we've been looking at the, we got interested in that because we quickly realized what these reactions, when you absorb even hydrogen, can proceed on different spin states, in triplet and singlet in this case. And we look at the sort of these two states, and we notice what if you twist the active site and go from square planar coordination around nickel center to tetrahedral, there is a crossing point there. We found minimum energy crossing structure, and the first interesting results we got is what turns out this minimum energy crossing structure has very similar twist angle, which is our sort of reaction coordinate in this case, to something which is found in real hydrogenase. So what it means, what in real hydrogenase, the protein effectively twists the active sites in a position where singlet and triplet state become quasi-degenerate, so either degenerate or very close to degeneracy. So that's telling us what this sort of two states might both participate in the reactions like hydrogen oxidation or reduction, and it's also might sort of tell us why this type of active sites don't work outside the hydrogenase. And that's because basically there is no protein, so there is no constraint there. So we did calculation with our with our code. This is on the left in the table. This is an example of sort of parameters which goes into code from electronic structure calculation, like spin orbit coupling again, gradients, and the reduced masses and so on. So this is type of the rate constant sort of plots you can get from the code. So we get in basically forward and backward rate constant for transition between these two states, singlet and triplet states. And in this case, we're comparing the solid lines, which is basically our calculation, with a sort of spin allowed transition when you assume there is no any type of sort of hindrance here, and you go on adiabatic states on adiabatic surface from one state to another with like 100% probability. So the rate calculated with our code turns out to be about a couple of orders of magnitude smaller basically than spin allowed rate, but it's still significant. So we still believe what this type of processes can occur. And we look actually in situation where we have a hydrogen on this side, but I don't have time to talk about that right now. But the long story short is basically a very significant probability of transition even when hydrogen is present. So I mentioned the MECP search algorithm, and since we're here talking about the proteins, all the calculations I showed before, all the results done on small active sites model. In this case, we wanted to look at the actually protein effects, and we implemented the minimum energy crossing point search algorithm for fragment molecular orbital methods, which is were described by Mark Gordon I think on Monday. And the idea behind FMO is basically you produce some fragmentation of your system, and when you calculate the like single fragments basically in a field, clone field of all other fragments, and when you calculate the interaction between pairs of fragments and so on. So it's basically many body expansion makes calculations possible for very large systems. We use Mira supercomputer at the Argonne National Lab to run calculation on, I think we went to up to the 130,000 CPU cores. And we look at the models as large as, I think, something like tens of thousands of atoms there. So this small sort of red dots here, this is water molecules. So this is actually properly salvated proteins here. And we get in very reasonable scaling for this type of calculations. So the blue curve here is ideal, and the red is the one we got for like up to 130,000 cores. Now, another example where I mentioned the high-level electronic structure theory. So another example we've done is a study of small molecule of thiophosgene, and there is experimental sort of data which says what. So it's relatively complex pump probe experiments, but basically the outcome here, what they were able to measure the lifetime of the triplet state, low-lying triplet state, and we were going to look at how this sort of reaction happens or transitions happens. And most of the prediction before that done with simple Fermi golden rule type approach were predicting something like 3 order of magnitude faster transitions. So we've done, in this case, very accurate Kapov cluster and CASPT2 type calculation with large active spaces. And we were able to demonstrate what basically all these transitions between these two, between triplet and singlet states happens in the tunneling regime. So basically there is no enough energy in experiments to reach the minimum energy crossing point. So this is a sort of one-dimensional cross section. This is MECP. And this line here, ZPE plus 600 wave numbers, indicate the energy available in experiments. So the only way for reaction to go from triplet to single is to tunnel through this shaded area, which is a barrier. And depends how you sort of approximate, how you work with your transitional state theory, statistical theory, right? So you can get different widths of the channel, basically, of this sort of tunneling barrier. And that's affect the tunneling sort of efficiency a lot. So what basically we got from theory is about 1 order of magnitude slower transition than the experimental transition. So this is a lifetime basically of this triplet excited states. Turns out, so we think the reason, I mean, this is 1 order of magnitude is actually not bad for kinetics. We think this is the main reason here is because we don't consider multi-configuration character of tunneling here. So it's all still one-dimensional model. So this is a sort of a nature of present statistical theory. So the last example, very quickly. So this is a spin-controlled surface chemistry, we call it. So we're looking at our sort of experimental colleagues in chemistry department look at the thermal desorption of this sort of simple hydrocarbon from silicon 100 surface. And they can measure how much basically molecules desorb at different temperatures. So, and that's give them some insight into sort of reaction process. We've done calculations on this. So this is a DFT and perturbation theory. And we found the crossing point. We found what the triplet, where is a singlet triplet transitions basically, and the triplet transitional state is significantly lower than singlet transitional state. So this is a comparison with experiment and theory for the, basically this is called desorption rate. So effectively it's a rate constant. And the important one is this low coverage curve, which is in blue. And if you look at the singlet reaction path, so basically if you stay on this black curve, you get this peak according to the theory over here at this high temperature. And this doesn't match to experimental blue maximum at all. On the other hand, if we look at the kinetics which associated with this crossing point and basically going from black to red and go through lower barriers, so this is actually matched quite well with the experimental maximum. So that's give us sort of some idea how those reactions on the surface happens, and they do happen through the through this sort of spin forbidden channel. So in summary, I talk about different spin dependent processes, so include excited state relaxation, spin forbidden reaction, molecular magnetism, and where's my mouse? Seems to lose my mouse. So I introduced Nonadiabatic statistical theory, talk about comparison with molecular dynamics, and the advantage of statistical theory is we can treat system on a long time scale, large system. We can use accurate electronic structure method, can look at the quantum effects such as tunneling and 0-point vibrational energy. I talk about free applications where we use different methods, basically different level of theory. And in the future, we would like to expand our sort of theory to magnetic field effects. So we would like to see if we can control intersystem crossing reaction with external magnetic field. So the code is should be publicly released, but it wasn't. I was hoping I can report it at this conference, but for different reasons I can't. So hopefully it will be released by the end of this year. So, and I will advertise as much as we can. And finally, I would like to point out what hopefully we can make some integration basically with so-called unnamed modular platform, which our hosts are advertising and been talking about in the first day of the conference. So this is my acknowledgement slide. So, and this is a group, this is people who contributed to development. We mostly funded by NSF, and DOE provided some computational time, and we have some money from ACS Petroleum Research Fund as well. And I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this wonderful talk. So we have time probably for 1 or 2 short questions.
Yeah, I think, you, somebody?
Yeah, Professor Mark Gordon.
Okay.
Please.
Sergey, I have a,
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sergey. Beautiful, really nice talk. I have a very technical question. You mentioned early on that you have automatic testing. Could you tell me what software you use for that?
Oh, that's, we are low tech. So it's basically, we have a script written in, I mean, current version, even written in Fortran, I think, maybe with some pieces of Python. And it simply runs through a bunch of tests, basically, we have. So, well, if you know old games style, so this is kind of similar to that. So we don't use anything fancy, but potentially we're interested to maybe expanding it to something.
So we for the last couple of years have been using Jenkins CI, and that works really, really well. I highly recommend it.
Okay, so yeah, I heard about that as well. So that's and this is something I've been thinking about. So, and yeah, we'll definitely will look at this, especially when the code gets larger. So it's become harder and harder to sort of deal sort of semi-manually with all these tests.
Yeah, at some point it gets too difficult to do it manually.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, Professor Choi.
I think this is really good for the unnamed platform. Even the script and the Python script can be just executable, can be modularized. So I think this is really good. But I really have a question. So you actually use the TFT and many other theories for your calculations. I was wondering whether you all have the spin-orbit coupling for all the different theories.
Yes, that's often a bottleneck. So typically we use CAS-SCF. In fact, even when we do DFT calculation, we still do single point CAS-SCF or something, well, better call it CAS-CI. We sometimes use actually DFT orbitals to do CAS-CI to get the spin orbit coupling. So, but there are codes which allow you to do spin orbit coupling with DFT basically. So, and in principle, I mean, the statistical theory is not limited to particular method or anything like that. So we can use even sort of some relativistic methods. We're trying to explore, for example, Dirac, where we calculate software, which is can basically produce spin orbit coupling from the fully relativistic 4 components calculation. So there are many sort of different ways to do that. We typically use, in simple cases, we use perturbative approach. So basically Brett Pauli or Douglas Kroll type formalism basically with perturbation theory and multi-reference or single reference sometimes.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's thank our speaker again.